Hello, welcome to this edition of the umgoblue.com podcast. This is Phil Callahan along with
Clint Derringer.
and we're here to talk about Michigan's loss by a score of 31-13 to USC on the road.
Again, credit to them, credit to Lincoln and that staff and what they did. But there's things that we got to look at, we got to fix, and we got to make sure we attack. It was good to see the fight as the team went. There was never any quit with the team, but there's things that you have to fix in these big time games against really good opponents to win. So, again, credit to them.
Well, Clint, what'd you think about this one?
Well, Michigan was way too sloppy in, really in all three phases. I don't know, special teams maybe wasn't. No, I would say the punting is just as bad. So yeah, all three phases just too sloppy to win a game on the road against a quality opponent. Just Michigan did not play championship level football for as much talking as they did about being the reason that the Coliseum was going to be sold out and making a big deal out of going out to LA a day early and seeing the Chargers facility.
So they'll go to class, do all that, and then we'll leave Thursday, be there Friday. We'll get a chance to practice at the Bolt, which is cool. So I know they got an away game, but so that's another great Michigan connection, Michigan West. So we'll leave Thursday, get there Friday, spend all day Friday, and make it as normal as possible for the kids, and then play on Saturday.
It was a lot of talk and not much to show for it, and I think that's the most frustrating thing. You and I both in August kind of highlighted this game as a tough point in the season. I think if I remember right, you picked it as maybe Michigan's only loss of the season. So expectations were, I think set correctly that this was going to be a challenge and Michigan was going to have to play really well to win. But it was just as disappointing in how they looked as it was the final result. And I think that's kind of what everybody's recovering from right now.
Well, Clint, you're completely correct. When we did our preseason predictions, I picked this as a loss for Michigan. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Here you have flying across country, different weather, different time zones, freshman quarterback on the road, a rocking stadium. There are a lot of reasons that this game should have been an important learning lesson in the ascendancy of the Michigan Wolverines. And unfortunately, unfortunately, it's exactly what you said. It's not the loss, it's how they lost, okay? I expected this to be a tough battle. I expected this to be a punch in the mouth that Michigan would learn from. What I didn't expect was the same feeling I had in the Oklahoma game, that this game felt essentially over at halftime. And you can look at the score and say, well, Michigan was in it, but it wasn't the scoreboard. It was the vibe. It was the feel. And, I went to this game, traveled cross country, even with lowered expectations of victory, I wanted to see this game in person. I wanted to see this team, this Michigan team, learn an important lesson. They say sometimes you learn more from failure than success. And I expect this to be a tough fought battle. It was not. It was a beatdown. And, you look at the score and the other thing that struck me was when they were preparing for this game, it was mentioned about what had happened to Penn State when they played UCLA.
Nah, I'm not. That's their game. That's what happened to them. I'm not gonna refer back to that. And they all saw it. They all know. They all understood what happened. We're not them. So our narrative and our focus will be on us and how do we go win this game. Execution, and our plan and our goal of what we're gonna do. So yeah, I can't speak to what they did and how they played. So yeah, we're just gonna be worried about us.
Boy, sure looks similar to me. right? And actually, Penn State played a lot better. So you look at this, and, you know, before this game, I predicted that this was going to be a pivot point for the season. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope when we look back that this is an outlier. Because if this is indicative of how the season's going to go, things are trending down.
Yeah, we kind of identified it being pivotal, which makes sense. You know, you're halfway through the season. You've got one loss already heading into the game. It's a big challenge. You know, certainly the way things stack up in SP Plus, you know, USC was 13th and Michigan was 14th on the way into the game. You know, everything kind of pointed at it being a little bit of a coin flip, you know, and you just kind of favor the home team and more experienced quarterback in those coin flip games. So it was certainly an uphill battle, but it was kind of a measuring stick to see, okay, is this defense ready to stand up to what SP Plus says is the number one offense in the country, and is the you know your new freshman quarterback Bryce Underwood, is he ready to play his best game and be in control and look sharp on the road? You know, in his third opportunity to kind of take the show on the road, and offensively certainly looked sloppy. I think the offensive line looked like they took a step back, figuratively and sometimes literally. And defensively, it looked like there was more confusion in game number 6 than there was in game number 1. You know, the players on both sides of the ball, especially in the trenches where, you know, the decisions have to be made in the split second after the snap of the ball, they just looked like they were confused and did not finish plays on either side of the ball. And that was strange to see, right? But Michigan's strength has been, you know, physical toughness and dominance in the trenches and patience and a willingness to just kind of grind another team into dust. And the reverse absolutely happened. USC was more physical and dominated in the trenches and looked like they had something to play for, where Michigan looked like they were kind of going through the motions. So, um, you know, there's, you know, we can pick a path here that you want to talk about more of the specifics, but in general, it really looked sluggish and mentally, again, it looked like a spring game type of mentality, and those types of mistakes and slow processing, which led to, you know, slow reactions and slow feet, and it showed up. And USC looked like the far better team on that Saturday.
When we look at the quarter by quarter breakdown, USC came out, scored a touchdown in the first quarter. Michigan answered with a touchdown in the second quarter. Okay, 7-7. Now, at that point, I will say that USC looked significantly better. Okay. Michigan had some big plays on defense to kind of keep it close. And then what we saw, again, a replay of Oklahoma, USC scored with 14 seconds left before the half. Oklahoma also scored a late touchdown. And then you go to halftime, you go into the third quarter. At the 10:45 mark, USC scored another touchdown to go 21-7, and at that point the game was essentially over. Okay? And you can look at how much time is left, and yeah, hey, 21-7, but the way this offense has performed, I had no confidence that they were going to be able to tie, and USC wasn't done scoring. You know, they added a field goal in the fourth quarter. Michigan answered with a touchdown, missed a 2-point conversion, and USC, you know, scored again to put some icing on the cake at 31-13. And Clint, I know we're going to tear apart both sides of the ball, okay? And I don't say that gleefully. There's a lot to pick apart on both sides of the ball. I know we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the defense. We're going to do a lot talking about what Wink Martindale did to prepare this team. But God bless it. If you can't score more than 13 points, the only team you can score 13 points and beat is Ohio State, because that's Ohio State. Okay. Thinking back to the game last year, this Michigan offense looks anemic. And last year, we were told and we believed that it was because the quarterback position was weak. Okay. We did not have the talent at quarterback. Well, now you got amazing talent at the quarterback position, and we're scoring 13 points. And again, I can't tell you how much it was rinse and repeat watching this game. I felt the same way that I felt when I was down in Oklahoma. You had a rocking stadium. You had a TV audience prep for this game. It was a chance for Michigan to go 5-1, maintain their undefeated status in the Big Ten. The country is reeling from what had happened earlier in the day to Illinois and what was happening to Penn State. And Michigan was, and I'll tell you, this is the thing that's really disappointing and concerning. This story was under the fold to those games. Okay. This was not a shock to the national audience. It was not a shock to the people who were there. Michigan got spanked by a good USC team, but not a great USC team. Maybe they'll be great. We'll see. But the oh, here we go again. And after the game, well, we need to get better. We need to tackle better. We need to continue to, all our goals are in front of us. Okay. You can say that, but it doesn't feel that way. And there's no area that I'm more frustrated with. We said in one of our initial podcasts of this season will go as the offensive and defensive lines go. And both of these areas are disappointing, none more than the offensive line. And my frustration that's really bubbling over right now is when Sharon Moore came in, he was a tight end coach and an offensive line coach. And I was really excited to have a coach whose speciality was that. Okay. And in my mind, I'm like, wow, here's a guy who had coached 2 award-winning lines, in Michigan's national championship year and the year before. We are going to be dominant in the offensive line because that's the thing he knows best. That's what we are going to see, right? And we made the excuse last year that it was, well, we lost a lot of guys at the NFL and it takes time to reload. What we saw on the offensive line against USC was really poor play. And I'm so disappointed. And I'm at a loss to understand how halfway through the season, we like to do the quarter by quarter check. We have 50% of our regular season data. And I see no indication that the offensive line is going to dramatically trend up. And that's really scary, because not only is it scary for this season, but it's scary for how Bryce is going to be able to develop moving forward.
Yeah, I share your disappointment certainly in this game, in this performance, and where it comes in the season. At the midway point, does make it worse for sure. I would be more concerned if I thought there was a lack of talent or ability or size or speed or whatever significant skill set that you needed in any particular position. Really the only position group that had me worried like that was the wide receivers when they struggled there for 2 or 3 weeks in a row. And now we see Andrew Marsh kind of emerging into that number 2 threat behind Donovan McCulley, and certainly took another leap forward in this game. In terms of silver linings, I think Andrew Marsh is becoming a legitimate threat. So I don't have the same concern that the team in position group by position group is not capable of doing it. I think that these things can be fixed because they look like a team that is stuck in the mud because the gears are turning between their ears. I don't know what Michigan can do offensively on the line with Grant Newsome and with Sharon Moore certainly getting more involved to simplify the calls or um, whatever adjustment is necessary, especially for the interior guys, to know exactly who they should block in any given look. But the most fundamental thing when teaching or when coaching a football team is if you're going to make a mistake, make it at 100% speed, make it at a million miles an hour. If you don't know who to block, pick somebody and go block that person 100%. Like make your mistake at full bore.
And Clint,
And
let me interrupt you for a second because absolutely right. And one of the most frustrating things that I saw in this offensive line play when I rewatched the game, you know, you see the game live, okay, and you have a certain perspective. I got back from the trip and I watched the game. And one of the things they tell you as an offensive lineman at any level is hit somebody, okay? To your point, do it at full speed, but hey, when in doubt, just hit somebody. You can always say, well, I hit the wrong guy, right? But you don't hit no one. You don't have your head on a swivel wondering where the play is going to go. I mean, the advantage of being an offensive lineman, and one of the reasons it's such a fun position to play, is that you know how you're going to attack, you know when you're going to attack, and you know where you're going to attack. You have three distinct advantages over the defense. Okay. And as much as we go on and on about how incredible defenses are and they're attacking, the offense has the advantage. If you cannot hit at least someone on a play, if you look lost, not knowing where the ball is going, okay, that is a fundamental problem. And we are seeing it on the offensive line repeatedly. And I just, you know, I thought I saw it during the game in real time. I took notes. I went back and it was worse than I thought. And it's among some of the more experienced people on the line. And I think it comes back to what you said about what calls are going in there where they're not hitting somebody obviously, right? There's a guy right there, hit him. Okay. Or what do you think you're doing? And it's frustrating because when I see mistakes that I would be mad if a high school offensive lineman made them, and I see that at this level, and again, it's one thing if you have a person who there's two injuries and you're throwing a redshirt freshman in, hey, stuff's going to happen. That's not what we're seeing here. And why I stack this up as concerning is that offensive line is supposed to be Sharon's baby, right? A couple weeks ago, when the offensive line needed tune-ups, he stepped in. Offensive line play seemed to go up. Now, why he needs to step in? Okay, that's an open question. That's not good. Okay, but he stepped in, and the offensive line seemed to get better. Well, we had a big regression last week, and I don't know if it's the crowd noise getting in the way of the calls. I don't know if it's nervousness. If you don't know what you're doing or you question what you're doing, you can, like you said, it can come across as half speed or less. But this offensive line is struggling right now, and I don't know any other way to put it. That I don't know if it's the combination of people they're putting in there. We saw El Hadi come back after being banged up. Maybe they just don't have the gelling, as they say, as an offensive line. But huge concerns. And what was really frustrating is there were failures right up the middle. Okay. And one of the things that you see when an offensive line struggles is they will reduce the splits, right? Basically just you make the gap smaller. Nothing they did seemed to prevent the intermittent failures. And it's really hard for any quarterback to overcome that. And the thing that happened last year, it wasn't that the offensive line was just bad last year. It was bad in unexpected, in unpredictable ways. Okay. If you have a line that's weak on one side or the other, you can rotate away from it. There's things you can do, right? Last year, we saw, up the middle, around the side, between the guards, between the tackle. I mean, you just saw intermittent random failures, and that's what I saw against USC. And that's really hard for any quarterback to get any level of comfort and find any way to sync up with that.
Yeah, a couple things. The first thing you pointed out that I think the questions are certainly on the interior. From guard to guard is where Michigan is struggling the most. And Greg Crippen had like four, I think games 2 through 5, Greg Crippen had probably his best 4-game stretch. And then he was back to looking like he was physically overwhelmed in this game. But the mental mistakes really were shocking because they came from Gio El-Hadi, your captain, your senior leader. He is the one that is the most glaring example of looking like he's trying to figure out where he should be. Do I block this guy or that guy? So he blocks neither. And that is right now for me the most frustrating thing, to see mental mistakes from your most experienced guy who is supposed to be a leader. And I'll tell you, it falls to the coaches, period. Position coach Grant Newsome has got to do better. They have to be better prepared on the offensive line. And Sharon Moore was the previous offensive line coach. It's his specialty. He hired this staff. He put them together. It's on him. They have to be better on the offensive line, 100%. And the cherry on top of this particular Sunday is how sloppy they look, even when we're not talking about X's and O's or technique. They jump off sides on a fake clap when there's not even a call in, right? They're trying to get the defense to jump off sides. Bryce Underwood claps. Who is it that flinches out in the slot? It's Marlon Klein, a senior, captain. False start. We go from 3rd and 4 to 3rd and 9. Bryce Underwood gets sacked, doesn't throw the ball away, 11-yard loss. Now you're out of field goal range. So a freshman mistake and a senior mistake add up to taking 3 points off of the board at a critical moment in this game. Samaj Morgan, third-year player, doesn't know that he's supposed to be off the line or on the line on a pre-snap alignment. Like you said, the offense knows the play. You know where you're supposed to be. That's your advantage. He forgets whether he's supposed to be on the line or off. I'm sure that he was supposed to be off the line, because if he had moved up onto the line, he would have covered an eligible receiver who was trying to go down the field on the play. He moves up right before the snap, and it's an illegal motion. It's a pre-snap penalty on an upperclassman, right? These are not just individual problems. They are a sign of the culture. Just like when things were going well, you and I talked a lot about the positive culture and what it meant. And this is the flip side of that. When it is spread everywhere, it's on the coaching staff. And the sloppiness that we see on the road and the sloppiness that we saw specifically in this road game falls on the coaching staff. Full stop.
And you hit culture, and I was thinking that, and I think that is what bothered me a lot. The feeling that I had watching this game is you can lose any game. Any team can lose. Things can come up. Okay. The cosmic tumblers, right? And it's one of the things that you see as you've added more games to the schedule, there's more opportunities for stuff to happen. And the great teams, the teams that have resiliency, the teams that have a great culture, which is what Michigan was under Jim Harbaugh the last 4 or 5 seasons. That team, so many curveballs came down, right? You know, the suspensions, the drama off the field, this just so much, and the team just shrugged them off, right? Well, here we are. We have a team that, as you said, is shooting themselves in the foot, okay, and repeatedly, okay. We also had another bad defensive penalty again, right? Celebrating after a play again, which led to another big play again. And what I'm struggling with is where are the captains to, quite frankly, shut that crap down? And it's one thing when you're a really good team and you got swagger and you're good enough to take a stupid penalty. And yet it's still a stupid penalty, right? This team is not good enough to do that. And they weren't good enough against Oklahoma. And you need to realize that that needs to stop. Okay. So it's frustrating that, even in this week in preparing for Washington, Sharon wore, when Harbaugh was here, they handed out these like factory work jackets.
I mean, I think the message is pretty simple. Like, the guys understand what happened. They understand it's a loss, and nobody's hurt more for a loss than the players and us, as coaches. So those guys they've been in here, they've been grinding, trying to get better. They're trying to fix all the problems and make sure it doesn't happen again. So the message really is simple. We got to go back to work. That's the reason I got the blue collar jacket on today. We got to go back to work right now. There's no pouting. There's no worrying about it. There's no making excuses for it. That's all we got to do, and that's all I know, and that's what we're gonna do right now.
So Sharon wore that in the press conference, and it's been much maligned in memes across the internet, right? And he's like, I'm wearing this because guys need to know that we need to get to work, okay? And I'm like, you should have been working all year, okay? And I get the point. I understand what he's trying to say, and I like the sentiment. But, in the post game, you have the player saying, well, all our goals are still ahead of us. And I'm like, yeah, we heard this last year. And I'm really frustrated with what we're seeing on the offense because we have two incredibly talented backs. And, you had a game where Justice Haynes looked electric for a quarter, then got knocked out with an injury. And, Michigan just picked up and went to the next one, right? And it's amazing that they have that kind of talent where, Jordan Marshall can come in and, he ended up with better stats than Justice Haynes did. But it's not enough. And then you have, Bryce Underwood, who intermittently looked really good. You could start to see him get the swagger. And kind of when he threw that interception, he was feeling a little too much, pushing it a little bit, right? And like you said, you got Andrew Marsh. I was joking that he is Bryce's favorite receiver right now. 8 receptions, 138 yards. Wow, that's great. You had Donovan McCauley, having some big catches. Well, what aren't we talking about in a positive way? The offensive line. None of this is going to matter unless the offensive line can pull things together. And then you got the defense taking, like I said, a stupid penalty. You have Jay Barham, okay, who basically is an amazing player, okay? And he has moved from linebacker to edge. He is playing poor technique, and USC, I swear, schemed to go right at him to take advantage of his poor technique. And you saw a USC team that was slicing Michigan up in the middle of the field, passing it well. So much so that when they kind of went away from it, I'm thinking, wow, if I'm a USC fan, I'm really pissed right now because they were passing like crazy. And then they started running like crazy. And I swear they went right at Jay Sean. They went right at him, you know, uncontrolled, undisciplined. And there you go. So you look at what they did offensively, and I believe, okay, when you look at their pattern, their template, I think other teams are going to try to emulate it. And obviously they have a lot of talent for not being considered a great team heading in. They sure look good on Saturday. You see the, hey, here's the key on how you can beat Michigan. And it'll be interesting to see how Michigan responds.
So defensively, I just want to highlight the one play that was the biggest nightmare, at least for me, from this game. And I want to start with kind of the context of a couple things from a coach perspective. Now, I'm no high level football coach. I can only speak for my, youth football and some high school football coaching experience. But we joke internally in our group with your brothers and especially in the car ride with your brother Dell, who also coached. That sometimes folks who are watching football think that it's more like the video game, like playing Madden or playing like the new NCAA football game. You call a play, and everybody just goes out and runs it. You push the buttons, and everybody does what they're supposed to do. But in reality, when you call these plays, there are 11 different jobs that you have to teach to 11 different players. And with the complexity, especially at the college level, a lot of times it's 22 jobs because you're doing this or that, depending on what they do, right? There's a lot of reacting in real time in these things. So it's not, oh, they just need to to throw the ball down the field. I heard Todd Blackledge on the broadcast. Michigan needs to create offensive pass plays. Like, yeah, I'm sure everybody would sign up to just all of a sudden throw the ball 70 yards down the field and score touchdowns. But you have to be good at that with 11 guys doing their job. You have to be able to protect, and you can see Bryce Underwood, even when there is good protection, he has happy feet, and that is more about his brain than it is about his feet. He does not trust his protection. He does not think that he's got enough protection in order to make whatever the reads are that are on his plate. And that comes from repetition and experience and rhythm and trust between the players as they go. So the coaching part of it is you have to be able to teach all of the guys all of the jobs. Defensively, you now have Jay Sean Barham playing linebacker at the beginning of the year and moving to edge. He is a definite game-changing talent in the pass rush at edge, for sure. But he now has two jobs that he has one foot in, one foot on one side of the fence and the other foot on the other side of the fence. And your point about his run responsibility, for sure, was exploited by USC. He was doing pass rush moves, exploding up the field on very clear run plays, and they ran just right underneath him because he was not either setting the edge, kind of making sure everything stayed inside of him, or he wasn't spilling, taking the inside gap and making the guy bubble out around and letting the linebackers run it down. One way or the other, your job is not to get as far up the field as possible like a pass rush against a run play. Again, I don't blame Jay Sean Barham for not understanding the nuance of stopping the run as a defensive end because he moved there as a mid-season adjustment. So he's got to get better and better against the run because now it's on film. He is certainly going to get tested for the last 6 games of the year. But the nightmare play that I wanted to highlight is about the coordinator. And Wink Martindale sometimes does what I used to kind of joke about coaching high school football that sometimes the coordinator just gets bored. The same thing, you're making the same calls. Maybe it's working. Maybe sometimes it's working. Maybe most of the time it's working, but you just get bored of saying the same thing over and over and over again. And you have to fight the urge to call something just to call it. And USC has a situation in the third quarter where there's a penalty on their wide receiver after a play. He kind of grabs the nickel corner's foot and kind of trips him up after the play. The referee sees it, throws the flag, 15-yard penalty. It's now 3rd and 26. USC kind of waves the white flag and just runs a straight handoff, to the split back, and they run this outside zone play. And if you look at what the defense is called on 3rd and 26, Wink got bored, did his showing like cover zero, showing like everybody was up at the line of scrimmage. You don't know who's going to come. You don't know who's going to rush. He eventually backs both linebackers out, and the normal 4 defensive linemen just come across the line of scrimmage. Why are they showing cover zero on 3rd 26? I don't know. They could have just played the base defense. But at the snap of the ball, both linebackers are backing up off the line of scrimmage after showing this cover zero look. They both get blocked. Jayshon Barham over pursues straight up the field. And the running back isn't even touched until 8 yards right down the middle of the field. It's okay. You've got 2 safeties. Neither one of them is blocked. Certainly, they're going to just break down and make a fundamental play, get the guy on the ground after 10 or 11 yards and force USC to punt, but they don't. Brandon Hillman comes flying in a million miles an hour and barely gets a hand on King Miller in the middle of the field. Barely touches him. I'm not sure whether he actually made contact. I'm not sure he would have been down in one-hand touch in recess football. So Miller cuts back on him, pulls away from Rod Moore, the safety on the other side of the field, and eventually Zeke Berry runs down the running back for a 46-yard gain or whatever it was on 3rd down and 26. Why? Why are we showing some cover zero fancy backing off at the line of scrimmage, right? Why is the safety trying to come in and make a kill shot on 3rd and 26? Just get the guy on the ground and force the team to punt. If they punt the ball back there, Michigan's got the ball down 14-7 in the third quarter. Instead, that drive turns into a touchdown drive, and you're down 21-7. It was almost as bad as the penalty in the Nebraska game that wiped out a 3rd down stop. And I texted you guys on Saturday. That play reminded me very much of the Hail Mary at the end of the half for Nebraska, where you called something ridiculous and exotic when all you had to do was do the base fundamental things. In that Nebraska Hail Mary, why was TJ Guy dropping back to the end zone to defend a pass with the ball in the air? Why isn't TJ Guy rushing the quarterback, doing the boring thing that he's supposed to do on every single snap? Wink got bored, made some exotic call, and it bit them in the Nebraska game. It bit them here in the USC game. Sometimes you just have to do the boring thing. Sometimes you just do the boring thing, do the fundamentals, and play another down. And that was when it wrapped up for me. I internally kind of had to turn off the emotions for the day. I was watching with my family. I didn't want to be screaming and yelling at the TV. But after that 3rd and 26 conversion, I had to shut it down so that I didn't say something that I would regret. And this is when my viewpoint shifted from it's not 4 or 5 or 6 players making mistakes, right? It's not like, oh, the offensive line, somebody's always failing and it's random. When that happens, it's not on the players, it's on the coaches. The coaches have to tighten this up. The silver lining, like I said before, is that This team is capable of doing it. If they can reassert themselves, if they can get back to the level of focus and execution that they should have, the team is talented enough to beat everybody else that's on the schedule for sure. But they're going to get tested right away with this Washington team that's coming in. If they make the same level of mistakes against Washington, that team will put up just as much, if not more, than USC did because their quarterback is dangerous with his legs. So there is no time right now to keep trying to do what you're doing and it's going to work itself out. There has to be a shift similar to what we saw last year with the defense and the team meeting where there was the come to Jesus meeting where they came in and shared their viewpoints and what needed to change and all of a sudden defense was better. They need to get to that moment right now. Offensively on the offensive line, they have to commit to finishing blocks and finishing every play through the whistle. We can't have offensive linemen watching the end of the play every single snap of the ball. They just have to get back to the basics and the fundamentals and do things the way that they should be doing. And they'll be right in this game with a chance to win if they can fix those things.
So, Clint, a few points. And again, you made many great points, but a few that I want to reiterate. Why does Bryce have happy feet? Because he can't rely on his line. And to your point, like he's worried about getting hit. You know why? Because he's worried about where he's going to get hit, and he doesn't know where it's going to come from, and that is concerning. The other thing about Wink, again, I claim no great coaching genius, okay? But when I see things that I would be angry if a high school team did, that's where I kind of draw my line, right? I draw the line of if there's something very basic, very fundamental that this team, if it's a mistake this team is making, and again, to bang on the offensive line again, when you have an offensive lineman not hitting anybody, that's a problem, right? Now, I would make the same thing, when you guys coached high school, I was I would be the voice of honesty. Okay. Hey, did we make a mistake? Yep, you made a mistake. And 99% of the time, you did, right? Again, it's not rocket science when you do something. The thing that I would say to Wink is the game doesn't exist to entertain you. Okay. Um, when you said he got bored, listen, you don't put some exotic coverage in just because you'd like to see it. Okay. Just because wouldn't it be cool if we did this, right? No, you know what's cool? Stopping the play. And a lot of football is blocking and tackling, boring fundamentals that you do hundreds of times a game, if not, a week. And I struggled with when you broke down the play that you mentioned where you had the coverage going all over the place. And then we talked about, the basic fundamentals of, hey, when it's a Hail Mary, there are things that you do, right? And like you said, you don't have TJ Guy running back into coverage. That's not what he's good at. You're not setting him up to succeed. So what's frustrating about this team, and I said this from the beginning, this team has the talent to be in the college football playoffs. This team has the talent that if it were to continue improving, it would be dangerous and it could be dangerous in the college football playoffs. What's dangerous about this team right now is that it's been exposed. And if I'm every other coach on this schedule, I'm showing my team this game film. I'm showing how USC schemed Michigan, and I'm thinking I can win this game. All right. I'm thinking it's doable. It's possible. And I look at, oh boy, we're going to Northwestern to play in Wrigley Field, bright lights, lots of attention. Oh man, right now, you have a Northwestern team that's feeling it. They jumped up and bit Penn State at home. Okay. Every team on Michigan's schedule from here out has hope. Every team on the schedule has seen how to beat Michigan. And you got Michigan State, whose whole season can be redeemed by beating Michigan. Okay. It's like that every year, but it's really like that this year. So Michigan, by not asserting dominance, by not showing competence in these games, is just opening themselves up for, we talk about we're halfway through the regular season. We have 50% of our regular season data. The data does not trend well right now. And Michigan's really going to need to put together a strong performance against Washington. And I will tell you, the frustrating thing right now is I don't know which way this team is going to go right now. And even last year, when they were struggling record wise, you know, I've said it before, I didn't go to Indiana and Illinois expecting to lose because you could see the pieces coming together. And when they finally came together versus Northwestern and really came together against Ohio State, it was not a surprise. You could see the gears starting to mesh. They did not mesh soon enough. I don't see the gears meshing right now. And I see potential problems in culture. I have questions about coaches. I have questions about, if I'm Bryce Underwood, I wonder if I should have went somewhere with a better offensive line. I don't like thinking that, right? I don't like thinking to myself, when I'm on his team of advisors, man, you got the offensive lineman to get it done here? And again, I have all these reasons why, oh, Sharon Moore, Grant Newsom, great coaches. They're going to pull this together. I don't see it pulling together, and I'm concerned.
Well, we don't see it right now. That's 100% true. But this is a high variability sport, especially in 2025. Three weeks ago, Penn State had the lead in double overtime as the number 2 team in the country. Fast forward 3 weeks, and James Franklin's been fired. It turns around quickly in both directions. Indiana, kind of a perennial doormat of the Big Ten, it is now right in the conversation as potentially, the greatest challenge to Ohio State for the Big Ten championship this year. 2 years after hiring the guy from James Madison University, Kurt Signetti. Things turn around quickly in this sport because the talent is starting to level off. And the difference in any given game is how well prepared you are on a play-to-play basis, how quickly the coaching staff can adapt and communicate to the players what needs to happen. And the positive of all of this particular episode of our podcast, the silver lining, is that everything that we're talking about is within the control of that coaching staff and these players. They can turn this around with a better approach to preparation, better focus from play to play, and a better mentality of playing every single snap all the way through the whistle. It's not a dearth of talent. They're dealing with the same types of injuries that all teams deal with halfway through the season here. We just have to see them do it. So I think Sharon Moore had the right response for his team about getting back to work, kind of getting back to the basics, starting with the foundation. But they've got to go do it. They've got to go walk the walk and not worry so much about what you're wearing to the press conference. So it can be controlled. I'm actually kind of glad that it's a solid team on the back end of this USC loss with Washington coming into town. Because if it was a lesser team, if there was some, non-conference cupcake team or something, like when they bounced back from the Oklahoma loss and blew out Central Michigan, we really didn't know whether that was more about Michigan figuring it out or if it was about Central Michigan just not being, at the same level talent-wise. Well, this is a good measuring stick for Michigan right now against Washington, because in order to beat them, they're going to have to fix these things that we're talking about. Not all of them. They don't have to play perfect, but they certainly have to play better in all three phases than what we saw last Saturday. So the gauntlet is down. They have to win the rest of their games to have a shot at the college football playoff, and you can only do that if you win the next game. It's time to get one foot in front of the other, 1% better every day. All of the Jim Harbaugh cliches apply right now. They need to start climbing the mountain right now, and they need to do what it takes to beat Washington on Saturday.
Well, I think that is the perfect level set for this game. And I really hope I'm wrong, Clint. I hope that we're going to see Michigan bounce back and show us what they're made of. Um, Part of why I'm so down was after the USC game, just how despondent the players were. And I'm not saying I don't want them to be upset, but they seem genuinely shocked at what happened. And, this is really a test for Sharon Moore. And, Sharon's, well, we got to get back to work and all our goals are ahead of us. I get that. I totally get it. Right. It's exactly what the coach is going to tell the media. There was the Bo Schembechler guidance of when everybody tells you you're great and you're on a roll, he would rip the team and kind of bring them down. And when you're down, the coach, his philosophy was you build the team up, you build them up, right? I feel a little different right here. I feel that because of some of the discipline things that we're seeing, the lack of discipline, I kind of feel like there's some butt chewing that's warranted. I don't know. We don't know what happens in practice. I think Sharon really needs to challenge the offensive line to do better, to just do better, right? You can't make these stupid, foolish mistakes jumping off sides. This team is not good enough to do that. Good teams don't do that. You can't do that. And, disciplined, tough football. And it starts on both offensive and defensive lines. And we need to see this. The offensive line needs to lead. It needs to protect Bryce. If it can do that, and I'll tell you, if there's a silver lining for me in this last game, despite the lack of scoring, okay, when I look at how janky the offensive line was, okay, Bryce was 15 for 24 with over 207 yards. And even with the offensive line struggling, he has the talent to do that. He's starting to find a rhythm with Marsh and McCulley. And even like at tight end, 4 for 146 yards. It's the offense is showing glimpses. It's not there yet. And the reason it's not there is the offensive line is not consistent. If that line can put together some consistency, we could see this offense start to ascend and grow. And that's really what I want to see on Saturday. I want to see them come out against Washington. Washington is going to be, they've shown that Michigan can bleed, right? And of course they want to make up, they beat Michigan last year on the West Coast when they were there, or in the Northeast, I should say, or Northwest, I should say. So Michigan should want to make up for that loss. And Washington wants to come out here and show they can win again. So we're going to have to see how it goes. But I'm really looking for, I want to see the Michigan defense not give up a touchdown in the first quarter. That would be great. I'd really like to see that. I'd like to see the Michigan offense score a touchdown or two in the first quarter and not kind of, grind to figure out what it wants to do. And I think that's what I'll be looking to see on Saturday.
Yeah, there are a lot of teams piled up in the middle of the Big Ten, and it's the second tier or maybe the third tier of the conference. But right now, somebody's going to have to battle their way into that top tier if they want to be the third or the fourth Big Ten team that gets in the playoff. And to do that, Michigan's going to have to find a way to tighten up what we're talking about here that we saw in Los Angeles.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the UMGoBlue.com podcast. This is Phil Callahan along with
Clint Derringer.
Go Blue.
Go Blue.
We got a lot of game left. That was 6 games into the season. We got 6 more left, and there's a lot out there. So not talking about goals or what we need to do, or we got to worry about tomorrow when we land. What are we going to do to get better tomorrow? What are we going to do on Monday as we get back as a team? Sunday they're off, let their bodies recover, recuperate. And Sunday we got to go attack it. Coaches got to go attack it right now. So there was never any quit in our team. So we're going to continue to fight.
Thank you for listening to the UMGoBlue.com podcast. All rights reserved.